Hi, everybody. Oh, as soon as I come on, I have a croaky voice. Anyway, nice to see everybody. Welcome back to Daisy Asks. It's nice to see all of you. I can see a few of you guys already in the chat doing this weird time. I know for the people over in the States, but I know a few of you guys are up bright and early and here to have a chat. Hey, Mustang. Hey, Christopher. And hey, RC. Hey, Sees Through. Lots of my buddies in here. I'm excited for all of you guys to be here. I'm feeling a bit tired. It's the last day of my little mini break and I haven't had enough sleep, too much talking and too much junk food, but I still wanted to pop on and share some thoughts because I've had some pretty big thoughts over the last few weeks. Something that I've been thinking a lot about and wanted to share, but I wanted to give it a bit of time. Hey, Unindicted, nice to see you. So, yeah, it's exciting. I'm just downloading something that I prepared earlier to play. So, yeah, just bear with me. I'll just have a chat with you guys while it's doing that. It's at 64%. I pre-recorded a part of it because I have a tendency to ramble, and this has got lots of different rabbit holes to it, as does everything I ever do. So, hey, Quietly, nice to see you. So, yeah, just bear with me. I have got slides and I have got a video, and yeah, let me know if I'm actually making sense because this is still kind of marinating in my mind. Before we get into it, I did do a little teaser, I suppose, that this was on the cards. I've talked about it in little bits in some of the lives recently, and I did post on my community page that Josh, Lowlight Recovery, and I would be doing a live soon, and that is coming up. So Josh isn't here today because it's very early in the morning, and so you won't see him on here now, but he does very much want to be a part of this. I guess, what was I going to say? This thread of talking we're going to do. That's a weird way of saying it. But anyway, he will join me later in the week and we're going to kind of hash it out. So there's a part in the video that I've already pre-recorded that will explain why I'm mentioning Josh and how he's helped in this process. So yeah, shout out to Josh. And he's really the only person I have hashed this out with other than ChatGPT and various other AI platforms. So like I said, it's in its infancy. If I'm completely off mark, let me know. I don't know if I am, but we're gonna see. So little teaser here. I do think I've done lots of checks on this and both Josh and I agree. We think it is important, so much so that he actually delivered some paperwork, or well, posted some paperwork to the lawyers based on this that I prepared a few weeks ago because he did think it was important for the lawyers to have a think about. So, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. Oh, okay, wait a second. I got my video. As soon as it downloads, it starts playing. So give me 1 sec and I will bring the video up and we will get started. And then after that, I'll do the rest of the video live. So while the video is playing, how many times can you say video in a sentence? Hey, Shay, nice to see you. While the video is playing, I'll chat with you guys. I'll be in the chat and then I will talk off the top of my head with the slides. Okay, so let's pull up this video. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, we'll add it to the stage. This is big and I can't wait to tell you guys about this, and I just hope that this actually makes a difference for the case, for justice for Abby and Libby, and for Rick as well, because I think I might finally understand why Rick was cleared in 2017. It's a tall order, but you all know I have spent hour upon hour, week upon week, looking at digital information in this case. And It's kind of silly because I'm not a digital expert at all. I got interested in this case because of the psychology of it. And then I started digging into pieces of evidence, and I've just found this area, understanding phone information, has just become a massive interest of mine. I've done lots of research, and early on, I believed that Rick was cleared based on his phone. And I think most people who support Rick Allen think similar things. Now, months and months ago, I was talking about the IMEI and the Mead hex, the detail on the PCA that sticks out like a sore thumb because essentially we have these phone handset identifiers on the PCA, and yet we have no evidence about Rick's phone that either ties him to the crime or is exculpatory. And I've always argued that information about Rick's phone either has to be good for the state or it has to be good for the defense. It isn't really a grey area because if Rick's phone is off all day, that's suspicious. If Rick's phone is at home all day, that's suspicious. If Rick's phone is pinging around the trails around the time of the crime, that's suspicious. But if Rick's phone shows that he did exactly what he said in his statement, and that is that he went to the trails, then he left and went home before the abduction, then essentially that's exculpatory. Now, we've heard so many mixed things about phone info, and I don't know if it's because investigators don't understand it or if it's just this web that is intended to confuse. And I always say, this is all alleged, this is all speculation. I'm not here to accuse anyone of anything, but I'm here to try and figure out something that just doesn't make sense. And that's what I've been doing. Okay, I've just spent 3 minutes introducing this and I haven't got to the point yet. So I think it probably feels a bit state the obvious at the moment. We all figured that, or a lot of us figured that the phone was probably something that could have cleared Rick. But we were trying to figure out what it was about the phone. What information could law enforcement have had that literally cleared the man who placed himself on the trails around the time of the crime? And I had always speculated about geofencing data. Now, I still think geofencing data is so important in this case. And if it is still available, as always, I just wish I could get my hands on it and actually plot out all the people on the trails that day. But realistically, geofencing was in its infancy around 2017. And I think the process took a little bit of time. And so it probably wouldn't have been done in those first few weeks. I think, as far as we're aware, there was analysis done in 2019 and then beyond that. So if it's not geofencing, then what are the other ways that we can analyze someone's phone? Well, obviously we all know about Knowledge C for Libby's phone. Yes, you can do extractions of an individual's phone. It wouldn't be Knowledge C if it's an Android phone. I don't know what the equivalent is, but essentially that could still be done. However, we know they didn't take Rick's phone in 2017 and they couldn't access Rick's phone in 2022 because it wasn't found in the search. So that puts that out. And then we've got tower dumps, which we know were requested. But the problem in Delphi is that there's only one cell tower. Well, not one cell tower, there's two, but there's only one cell tower that pretty much covers the main areas involved in this case. So the crime scene, trails area, the town, and Rick's home are all covered by the Wells Tower. And potentially Rick's home and the trails are actually covered by the same sector of the tower. So that would not be very useful information because if somebody pings to that tower, it means they could be at home or at the trails or in town. And if they even ping at the same sector, in the case of Rick, he could be pinging at home or the trails. It doesn't give you very accurate information. So geofencing is more accurate, but unlikely to have been available in the early days. And tower dumps in an area like Delphi, you can't triangulate, you've got minimal towers in that area, it wouldn't be very accurate either. So what else is there? Well, guess what, guys? There is another piece of digital/phone data that was used in this case. And that, my friends, is called NELOS. Now, NELOS is a name that is given by AT&T. I believe Verizon also does something equivalent. It's not called NELOS. This is where the fact that I'm not an expert probably shows. But essentially, it can be done with various providers, I believe. But that's not the point of today's discussion. The point of today's discussion is what sort of data we get from a system or a report like a NELOS report. What is NELOS? Well, NELOS stands for Network Event Location System. It estimates the location of a phone based on passive interactions with the cellular network, and it doesn't rely on GPS. It uses data such as cell tower and sector connections, but also signal timing and handoffs, round trip time, frequency band usage, LTE, 3G, 4G, and background data syncing or app activity. And phones often generate NELOS entries even when the user is not actively calling or texting. Routine background activities such as apps syncing or the phone switching sectors can trigger location estimates. Now, I don't understand all of those parts. You don't need to understand those to see what's relevant, though, because we've all seen a NELOS report before. Let me pull it up. Remember this? Now, this is a NELOS report that is a defendant's exhibit QQQ, and this is actually not for Rick's phone. This is for Libby's phone, but it is still relevant because it tells us a couple of things. One, it shows us what would be contained in a report like this. And two, it shows us that as early as the 20th of February, law enforcement were accessing, I suppose, reports like this. Now, of course, this is the victim's phone that has been traced, I suppose. This is information about the victim's phone. And so this was received fairly early, about a week after the girls' bodies were found. But in 2017, these types of reports would be requested for other people, witnesses, people of interest. They were a routine thing to be requested. I believe they probably still are. And the reason they're so important is because these reports are not just a general tower report. They're not an area report like in geofencing. These are based on the handset itself. So you can use the phone number, the IMEI, the MEAD identifier, and you can see where that phone was. Now, this is independent of the SIM card, if that makes sense. It's showing you where the handset is. So it's also helpful for things like identifying burner phones and things like that. Any sneaky things people might be trying to do with the phone, this is the handset identifier. It's not just a SIM card. So you can take the SIM card out of the phone and put another one in, and that phone will continue to be tracing this sort of data. Now, apologies if I butcher the digital terms. I'm still getting my head around it, but I'm trying to focus more on the narrative summary of why this is important and why I actually think this could very well have been the reason that Rick Allen was cleared in 2017. Now, I've got a full presentation I'm going to go into, but that was a long story short, just to start off with, so you know where we're headed. So what I'm saying here is that this type of report is called a NELOS report through AT&T. There are other names, as I said, through other providers, was a routine practice in law enforcement investigations in 2017, and I'm sure continuing today. And it offered an option of tracking or tracing the approximate movement of a handset. And it didn't just rely upon cell towers, but other factors. So it's not as accurate as geofencing, but it is more accurate than cell tower alone, particularly in this area where we know that everything in that area seems to be captured by the Wells Tower. So this is, it's hard to understand why law enforcement would have taken Rick's IMEI slash meat hex. His phone had a meat hex on an IMEI, same diff though, can still do the same thing. It's hard to understand why they would have routinely just taken that for a witness and then done nothing with it. And really important contrast here is that Cheyenne Meal, in her testimony, she actually indicates, she's asked directly, did anyone get your phone info? And she says no. So they weren't doing this for every single witness, but they did do it for Rick Allen. And remember, they also took a photocopy of his BMV. Now, all of that put together suggests they were actually doing the usual thorough investigation of this witness. And it doesn't mean they thought Rick was a suspect, because they don't just use this for suspects, but they use this to kind of exclude people, to understand timelines and things like that. But clearly they thought Rick was relevant if they went to the effort of pulling out the battery, getting the phone identifier, submitting that to the particular department of ISP that looks at that. So there's no good reason for them to do that otherwise. Okay. I'll explain, like I said, in more as we go along, and hopefully cover all the different bits and pieces that might help to make this make sense, because there's just so many threads to this. One other thing I want to point out before going into the detailed analysis is the timing. So if we look at another document that we've looked at many, many times, because it's part of the lost tip narrative, and we look at this is one of the many sheets that was floating around about Rick Allen. This one here is not one of the documents that Kathy Shank is connected to. This here is, I believe they call it the disposition summary. So basically, this is the one, though, that is printed. Look down here. We've got another print date on the 25th of February. So it's about a week after they met with Rick, right? Or Doolin met with Rick. And remember, there's a few things on this document. It says complete, and it says status covered. Now, what you can see here is indicators on this page here that a week after he was interviewed, they've marked this complete and covered, which essentially is a status given to something that doesn't require any follow-up. It's kind of the Orion equivalent to cleared, I believe. And interestingly, they've gone to the effort of also printing it out. Now, what would the reason be for printing it out? Usually, something like this will go to the lead investigators. It'd probably be part of their meetings, just to say, well, where are we up to with that Rick Allen guy who was on the trails, or whatever. So this isn't something minor and irrelevant. They wouldn't print out every single tip, because otherwise, where are they storing all of these? I mean, Kathy Shank's filing her own things. This is another document altogether. And if they were filing these somewhere else, well, why has no one looked at it again? So there's just, again, so many reasons that this here is not an indicator of something that was lost, and is in fact an indicator of an investigation that was actually thorough when it came to Rick. And it's interesting because the story now is being rewritten as though accidentally someone wrote lead cleared, but actually we've also got Orion entries now that say complete and covered, and that are printed a week later. So, there's just too much paperwork around for this lead to have been lost. We know the lost tip narrative is absolutely a fairy tale at this point. There really doesn't seem to be any basis for believing that anymore, based on all of this paperwork, the print dates, Doolin's testimony where he scans and emails it and shreds it, but then he finds it in a binder when Lickett calls him. There's just too many inconsistencies in this story for it to really be believable. Okay, so let's get into the full presentation now, and I'm going to take you through it piece by piece. Now, today I'm going to go through it piece by piece. There'll definitely be more things to add on. This one is going to be a whole series of videos, And yeah, I don't intend to stop here. So if you have questions, if there's anything that isn't clear, if there's anything that's erroneous, this is evolving. We always do evolve things on the channel. So sometimes I'll say something I may misspeak or I may have been led astray by AI. I do try to triple, double, quadruple check everything. But if I'm led astray, if things kind of go awry, you guys let me know in the comments and we can update stuff as we go along. And just like we did with the cold shock theory and the lost tip narrative, I'm sure this will develop over time. And before I go on any further, so I came across this whole thing about a month ago, I would say. I think it was a few weeks ago. And at the time, I was in contact with Josh, Low Light Recovery, and he very kindly reached out to me and actually was inquiring about some of the work that I'd been doing on the case. And he was really being so kind and so respectful, which was just beautiful. I mean, everyone who watches the channel and likes and engages in the chat, I totally appreciate all of you, and you guys do that. But you also know that there's plenty of people who just ignore me or critique me unfairly, or I just feel like a lot of people don't actually pay attention to a lot of the stuff that we do here because it goes against dominant narratives of both sides of the spectrum. And anyway, long story short, Josh had reached out to me about some of the Snapchat stuff, the 151 Snap, and he was interested to learn more about that. And so we struck up a couple of conversations. And when this kind of came to me one day, I was like, I need to bounce this off somebody else to see if this actually makes sense and if this is actually as big as I think it is. And I have to really credit Josh with being somebody who was able to sit with the data with me, research it from his end, and again, help me to verify that what I was looking at was correct and that what I was doing was most likely, or what we found was most likely going to be helpful. And then on top of that, Josh really kindly offered to have this delivered to the lawyers, which was amazing too, because as you all know, I live on the other side of the planet and it was like literally weeks before Christmas. And I also have ADHD. So the chances of me getting to a post office and delivering something are slim. And we didn't want this to fall through the cracks because both of us do believe this is important. So that's kind of the backstory. Josh is going to come on and do a live with me very soon. We're just trying to tee up times. It's just tricky because of holidays and time differences, but he's going to come on with me on a live and we're going to talk about this together. Josh asks really good questions. He's able to kind of look at it from a different angle and also kind of get some of the information out of I guess the whole process that I might skim over. My only fear is, what if we can't action this? That's my biggest fear. But anyway, we're going to give it our best shot. I hope that this can, I guess, gain some traction. And I also hope secondarily that there is some way that this can be investigated and that something can be uncovered that corroborates this so that it can actually be used as evidence to support Rick, because at the moment I think it's a very coherent narrative. Probably shouldn't use the word narrative too there though, should I? But I think it's credible, but we don't have any solid proof of it. And, without proof, we can say, well, it was probably done. But in order for it to actually help a man who's been sentenced to 130 years for this homicide in, this stage, it needs to be more than just it sounds very likely. It needs to have something concrete that goes with it. And we're going to talk about some of the things that maybe could be concrete evidence of this. Again, if anyone knows better than me, though, the lawyers, the law enforcement people out there, or anyone who's a bit more au fait with that side of things, the legal side of things or the law enforcement side of things, please let me know, because of course I don't know anything about that stuff. And that stuff's really hard for me to get my head around, particularly living in a completely different country as well, where our things aren't exactly the same anyway. Anyway, okay, I've rambled a lot. That's 22 minutes of rambling. Now I'm going to return back to the live with you guys and talk through the rest of it. So interesting, guys, because I was looking at the poll and nobody knew about NELOS, and either did I. The first I learnt of it was when I was looking at the Knowledge C data. I came across that exhibit in one of Case by Case's Vault shows and found it really useful because it really helped to solidify the cold shock theory. But it's interesting that this is another layer of, I guess, phone info and that none of us actually really understood. And that's why I said it's the phone data no one talks about, because I didn't know about it either. And that's why I thought it was a big thing. And then seeing the poll there where I think 15 people voted and no one knew about it suggests that it really is the phone data that no one's talking about. So let's get into a little bit more about it. See-through, I'm going to answer your question. See-through's like a little thorn in my side, but with a cute puppy and we're friends. So I'm going to tease you a bit, see-through, but we're going to answer this question because I don't think the defense have this, and I'm going to explain why they wouldn't have it and why there could be plausible deniability from the other side about this because, yeah, I'll explain it. Okay, so let's get into it. Like I said, I'm still getting my head around this. I will butcher digital forensic concepts at times because I don't understand them all, but I get the gist. That's all I'm aiming for here. We'll then let somebody else take the baton from me who actually understands the finer details. And if you're one of those people, let me know for sure. Like, definitely let me know because I'd love to hear more. Just checking, is my sound good? I think it is, but I don't see anyone in the chat. You guys are all quiet, but I know it's early morning over there. C3 is the only one asking me about the three girls again. C3, can you hear me? I think you can. I'm guessing people would say if I was muted. Okay, so let's go into the presentation. This is me with the long dark hair see-through. So you see, that was 2022, so it was still shorter by then, yeah, I used to have long dark hair and I'm definitely weird. Thanks, Christopher. I'm glad you guys can hear me. Thanks, Jamie. I wasn't on the trails that day, guys, but I definitely did in 2017 have long dark hair and I was weird then. I don't have long dark hair anymore, but I'm still weird. Okay. I shouldn't laugh now at this point, though, because this is a serious point. These girls are always front and center of our mind. And as much as I'm here today to advocate for Rick, I'm always here to advocate for true justice for Abby and Libby. And anyone who knows me and knows this channel knows that I don't think advocating for Rick and advocating for Abby and Libby is mutually exclusive. I think the goal is the same, and that's to get the real perpetrators and to ensure that an innocent man isn't held in jail for the rest of his life for a crime he didn't commit. Aisha Finneran, nice to see you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the information was suppressed. So geofencing could also have helped understand the phone data that was suppressed. But NELOS is something even different from that could have been used earlier in the process as well. So, there's multiple layers. The geofencing is probably our best bet now of confirming the phone location. If it's, if they've still, they will have to have some of it still available that could be looked at. NELOS now, you would not be able to request it now. It's way too late, but there's still ways that maybe we can, not me, obviously I can't do this, but hopefully I can encourage people who can do this to access information that would support this theory. So just pop the disclaimer on the screen. You guys all know that this is just my own personal opinions. It's for discussion purposes. I'm not an expert in this area and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just speculating from publicly available information. So sorry about keeping on clearing my throat, guys. If I don't talk for a minute or two, it gets all croaky. Okay. So the first question We have, and I mean, I've asked this for a long time. Why did law enforcement take the IMEI Mead hex identifier? Now, that was on the PCA, and it seems as though it's something super, super relevant because it's on the PCA. And yet, that piece of information didn't tie Rick to the crime. So to me, that was kind of a little bit like, I don't think it's a bit fishy, to be honest. I'm using Cryptex's favorite term here, fishy, because I think it sort of looks to anyone reading it that information may have actually been part of the case, and yet it wasn't. According to law enforcement, there was nothing with the phone data that showed anything. So why is it in the PCA? The PCA is a whole issue, right? And we all know that there's plenty of issues on there. But aside from that, why would they take that information? And there are specific reasons it is collected. Another side point in the video that I just played is that they didn't apparently take this information from Cheyenne Mill. We don't know about any of the other witnesses, but it wasn't being taken from every witness. So if it was taken in this case, isn't that kind of an indication that it was being taken for a reason? Contrary to what we initially believed, this was actually, the process that Doolan followed was actually pretty thorough and good. And we're going to go through why. I'm not suggesting that what happened after that was, but the process of getting the IMEI or Mead identifier, the process of getting the BMV printout, all of that stuff is part of a good triage in this investigation. So that was actually normal process, but what happened next wasn't. Sorry, guys, I've really got the frog in my throat today. No frogs outside because I'm on holiday, but a frog in my throat instead. Okay, so in early violent crime investigations, these phone identifiers are collected to verify or exclude a person's proximity to the crime window, confirm whether a handset could intersect with victim data, clear witnesses cleanly and quickly, reduce false suspicion in constrained geographic areas, and it's standard practice, especially with FBI involvement. Most of the time, these identifiers are collected for elimination, not accusation. Sorry, guys, I'm gonna mute for a sec. Sorry, it's kind of gross, like clearing my throat for like minutes on end. Okay, so the collection of this isn't actually a weird thing to do in an investigation like this. It's actually a pretty standard process. And generally, it's used to kind of sift through some of the phones in the area. You could use it with the tower dumps, but in an area like Delphi, it wouldn't be super helpful because the tower dumps really don't isolate any particular areas. There's no triangulation possible when the majority of Delphi is covered by one tower. So it's not super helpful. There could still be some things you could analyze off it, as I've discussed before in my geofencing presentation months ago. But yeah, the cell tower dumps were not going to ever be super useful here. And that's why they went on to do geofencing and cast analysis later on. But NELOS is the kind of intermediate step. And we know that they use NELOS because we've just seen the report from the 20th of the 2nd, 2017, that was the historical kind of data for Libby. So why was Rick asked for his? Well, the most common reasons would be situational, not necessarily accusatory. He self-placed himself in the relevant space-time window. So if a witness said I was on the trails, I was there around that time, I may have crossed paths with others. They had they had access. He willingly gave over his phone and let them take the battery out and get that. And he was there in the known window. We've all speculated this before, not speculated, we've all discussed this before. The fact is, he's the only man that came forward and said he was on the trails in that absolute key time window. We've got the people that said they were there a little bit later, but he would clearly be someone that we said Doolan would have looked further into, because he was there and he's saying that he saw 3 girls. Is that Rayleigh Voorhees see-through? Is that the girls that were on the trail that also saw Bridge Guy? I do believe he saw those girls. I don't believe he was the Bridge guy they saw later. I think they just didn't really notice him, but I've talked about that to death. Let's just get back to the main points here. So the IMEI or the MEAD allows them to answer very quickly, was his phone registered on the network during the window? So that can be done with tower dumps and cell information. Did it drop earlier than claimed? Was it nowhere near the sector covering the trails? And this is exclusion triage. Now, sometimes that could be done with the cell tower dumps alone in an area where there are more towers, but in Delphi, that wouldn't have been enough. It would be enough to show that the phone was on or off potentially, or in the area of the Wells Tower or not, but it wouldn't be able to show whether Rick was at home or at the trails. So he, like I said, was one of the few people who admitted he was there during that time window. And those types of people need more verification because you can then clear them cleanly, particularly if you don't think he's the guy, and you can close it out definitively one way or another. It's procedural efficiency. Okay, so just a lot of repetition here. Let's go forward a little bit. So digital triage. So in the early stages of an investigation, they're trying to do three things fast. And in this case, it would have been super fast. We've got, two juvenile victims of a horrific crime that I think anyone who saw the scene would be concerned about the safety in that area after that crime, because most people would agree, looking at that crime scene, the crime scene looks like an organized sadistic offender, as I've said many times. That's a very dangerous person. So nobody wants to be walking around in a small town with a person like that not apprehended. And obviously as well in the small town with two beautiful young girls murdered so horrifically, that's going to be a massive priority. This case is not some small, tiny case of a burglary. It's a massive case, and the FBI were involved. So they really would have been doing this fast. They're going to want to know who was there. They're going to want to know when they were there, whether they would have crossed paths, and they want to be able to close off the leads that aren't important. They've got lots and lots of leads, as they love to tell us. So, basically, they want to get rid of this really quickly. Sorry, guys, I'm not going to read the chat just at the moment because I get too distracted and then I lose my train of thought, but I'll come back to you guys soon. So you need to use the IMEI or MEAD checks to support 2 and 3. Verify or exclude possible intersection with the crime and document the verification so the lead can be closed. If the goal's just suspicion building, they would then escalate interviews, retain devices, and seek warrants. So if they had been really concerned about Rick, they would have actually re-interviewed him. They would have taken the phone and done an extraction. They would have sought out those warrants back in 2017. But instead, it appears the goal was resolution here. And so they took the identifiers they checked, most likely, we don't know for sure, but most likely, and then they archived. They marked the lead covered. Now, this is not just scrawling across a piece of paper, lead cleared. Remember, we also have, oh, sorry, I just put the wrong thing on the screen. Sorry, guys. I'm juggling too many bits and pieces here. Here we go. Okay. We have this, right? This was printed on the 25th. Remember, Rick was interviewed on the 18th. So this is a week later. This is not one of the documents that Kathy Shank found. And it says status covered, which essentially, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, anyone in law enforcement, but I believe covered and completed means this has been essentially closed. This tip is no longer important. This is not just a mistaken lead cleared in red pen, like we've been told. This is lead cleared in red pen, as well as the other notations on the one that Kathy Shank has and that she's reprinted in 2019, not 2022. But we also now have this sheet here, and this would have been printed as kind of a finalization of this lead. It's done, it's finished. And let's take this to Holman and the main crew and tell them, don't worry, that guy that said he saw 3 girls, we don't really need to follow up anymore. We've checked him. He's not our guy, right? So to me, This sheet here is highly suggestive that they followed up over the ensuing week. They did what they were meant to do, and they excluded him based on something. And yes, it could be something else. It could be, it could be that they exclude him based on CCTV, but we don't know. We don't see any of that. But what would be probably the best way, and we've all talked about this and speculated, the best way to exclude him, short of there being a direct alibi or a camera or something concrete like that, would be through his phone. And we know they used digital evidence in this case, and they used it early on. So, yeah, essentially, this here is not just one person mistakenly misfiling. It's not just one person doing a cross through it and writing lead cleared. This is a whole process that they followed to exclude the man who willingly came forward and said he was on the trails that day, gave his phone details. He wasn't a threat. Now, they're not going to rule him out just because he doesn't seem like a threat. You don't just do it based on vibes, right? Not in a double homicide investigation, right? So Doolan didn't just say, I don't think it's him, let's just file it away, nor would anybody else have said that. If they were going to officially mark it as covered and less relevant, but still printed out as part of their active case file to show the lead investigators that it's covered, it's done. We've done it. This guy isn't our guy. Now, pretty poor form, I think, that there's nothing written on here that suggests why it was completely covered. In a little tiny allied health practice like where I work, there's no way that we can just close a file and not write why we did it. So I wonder if that's just not written on here, but is there something somewhere else on Orion where there's a notation as to why they've done this? I don't know. I don't know how Orion works. So again, I know we do have friends of the channel who have connections to people in law enforcement. So if anyone can answer that question about Orion, let me know. But I don't think this is just some random printout. And why was it printed out on the 25th of the 2nd, which is exactly a week after they spoke to Rick, who got his phone identifier, which is interesting because this NELOS page, which is to do with Libby's phone, not Rick's phone, but look at the date. It's a week after the girls go missing. And so essentially it seems like there's this sort of 1 week turnaround or a few day turnaround, which is not uncommon for the NELOS reports as far as my research shows. Okay, so I've gone off track with my slides, but bear with me, guys. Okay, so it's hard to know how to organize this. So I'm saying everything in its entirety, and then what we'll do is we'll condense it down over time. Like this will be a series of videos. So if I'm going on too many tangents and it's hard to kind of tie it all together for you guys, because it is for me, I don't know if that's just because my brain just struggles to organize it all together. Yeah, don't worry. We're going to keep going over it. And you can absolutely ask questions and comment, and definitely we can continue to evolve it like we did with the rest of the stuff we've worked on. Okay, so let's keep going. So phone numbers can change and SIMs can be swapped, but an IMEI ME doesn't. Unless you're using a completely different handset, that is the best identifier of your handset. So if I take my phone and I want to do some dodgy stuff so I get another burner SIM, it doesn't matter because the IMEI or the MEAD hex is linked to this phone. So it's basically handset specific. Okay. So it allows tracking the handset across towers is really important here too, because realistically, this sort of a NELOS printout like we've got here, some people have speculated, well, maybe the girls leave the area in between and that's why there are no pings for this big gap. Well, if they did, it would still show up here. It would be different longitude and latitude coordinates. It wouldn't just have blank spaces like it does here. This big long blank space, this is consistent with the cold shock theory, because remember, this is GMT time, which is not Delphi time. So this here is 5:44 and this here is 4:33, and that matches really well with the cold shock theory and with the knowledge C data. The phone is dead between those periods and after that period, and that's why it's not creating any more coordinates. And also the location accuracy is really bad here because they're deep in the woods. They're not moving much. They're not using the phone, and the phone is really struggling from this point. This is where I believe it sort of hits the cold. So you can see the location accuracy gets really terrible. And the most realistic reason for that is that the phone is catastrophically, malfunctioning because of the cold shock idea. Even before that, like when the phone is still functional, so when they're on the bridge back here at this is 205, it's not great accuracy. You can see it's like 2.5 kilometers, 10 what's 10 kilometers. Like it's not greatly accurate, so it seems pretty much like this wouldn't be useful. But remember, this whole period they're in a very small area and they're on the trails, which is more remote and pretty much a similar distance from the tower. Whereas if Rick parked at the trails, was at the trails, then left the trails, drove through town back home, which would be his normal route, well, then he would be getting closer to the towers. There'd be movement. There'd probably be more pings if he's using his phone. So realistically, this could be a lot more accurate. So don't be put off by the fact that this is super inaccurate for Libby's phone. It would be different for Rick's phone if he actually went into town or drove past the town. He's in a more residential area versus this area, which is deep in the woods. And also that the phone is struggling for parts of this. Okay. Right. So yeah, it can be used for ruling out burner phone narratives. I'm not going to go too much into that. You're welcome to read the slide if you're interested in understanding about burner phones. And cross-checking device reuse. So the same handset was used with different numbers. So these are some of the things you can look at as to whether someone's doing anything dodgy with the phone and SIMs and burners and things. That's not what we're getting into today, but if you're interested in learning more about that, you can have a look on the slides. And carrier and forensic correlation. So the IMEI bridges carrier records, device forensics. It lets investigators confirm the phone in our hands is the same phone the network saw, and that continuity is essential. So it really is a useful tool. And most importantly for our discussion now is that the IMEI or MEAD is frequently used to confirm a device never entered the crime area sectors, show it powered down before the window, show it was stationary elsewhere. And those are the outcomes that can either close tips or escalate tips. So this is why it's kind of a triaging type thing. And finally, for future-proofing the case, so even when there are no issues that are identified, collecting this allows law enforcement to recheck the device if new tools or methods become available, i.e. geofencing, compare the handset against future tips or emerging persons of interest, confirm or exclude the same device if new data sources later surface. So it creates a stable device reference and evidence anchor. It doesn't necessarily imply any suspicion. And I've put in here, nothing new, phone info provided. So, it's important to have that on the file so that they can check it. They're not going to just have that sitting on the file for no reason. So the bottom line is it doesn't mean he was a suspect. It doesn't mean he was under deep suspicion. But what it does mean is they were actually doing basic competent triage. And in a case like Delphi, the absence of that collection and subsequent follow-up would actually be more concerning than its presence. Now, we have this haphazard way that they're going about this case. They're not worrying about females. We know that, even with the DNA, with the hairs. Shay and Mill don't care. They don't want to talk to her. But they are focusing on males, probably because of the Bridge Guy video. Still silly. They should have cast the net as wide as they could. But they did collect Rick's phone identifier, the MEAD hex. So why is there no subsequent follow-up? That is actually a red flag because that doesn't make sense. Okay, so these are the steps that they can go through in terms of digital, like a review of the phones and the digital information in the area. The first is the CDR, the call detail records. This only answers a few things. If the phone was on the network, if it received events, like SMS calls. It touched a serving switch tower. We've seen the CDR for Libby's phone in a one tower area. It can't resolve very much. It's basically not super useful. It just tells you whether the phone's on or off and which tower it's pinging off. So it tends to need to be escalated in a situation where we've got only one tower. So the escalation would happen if the person, for a particular individual, if that person self-places near the scene, timing overlaps the crime window, the device remains active during the window, the phone drops unexpectedly, that would look suspicious and they would want to follow up. The area has limited tower coverage. And we can see that Rick in Delphi ticks all these boxes. So, for example, if you said, oh, I went to the trails on February the 12th, they probably wouldn't do this further escalation for you because they'd be like, well, who cares? That was the day before. But if you said I went to the trails at 1:30 that day, well, they're going to be like, okay, well, you were there at a relevant time. We need to find out more about what was going on with you and your phone. So what does going further mean? As I said before, it means like NELOS or network event analysis using the IME. And the phone number can also be used. They can look at a bit more information. And so even without triangulation, they can show if it's definitely not there, if it's active elsewhere, if it's inactive before the window. So it's still going to give you relevant information, even though it's not going to give you exact locations. So after escalation, this is what the outcome would look like. It would either be location inconsistent with the crime. So if it shows Rick is in a completely different area, maybe he's actually still at his mum's house, then that would mean he was cleared. If he's inactive, if it's inactive before the window, I don't know about that one. Inactive before the window. Because I think that could look suspicious. But anyway, never mind. Active but not registering near the scene is kind of the main thing that would get you cleared. But if there's ambiguity, then they would probably have that still sitting there as something to look into further. So escalation stopping at CDRs is rare if there are better tools available like NELOS. Particularly for a man that's placing himself at the crime area and in the crime window. Now, I don't mean in the crime scene, but at the trails. Okay. So, a lot of this is repetitive, so I'm not going to read through all of it because I put as much detail in this as possible. So if you guys want to understand it more, you can pause and read that. I'm just having a look at any questions. I can see a lot of you guys are talking about some other things as well, and that's totally fine. But I think See-Through is the one that's got a question about this, so let's pop you on. See-Through is like a favorite here. Favorite child, See-Through. It gets on the screen all the time. So even if he was home, he lives that close, what would it tell you? Well, this is the whole point. So if Rick goes to the trails and then he leaves the trails and goes home, what NELOS would show, if we look at Libby's one, like I said, it's probably not a good example because Libby is not moving a large distance. She's not using the phone. The phone is failing, and also she's deep in the woods. But you can still see it gives you like point by point kind of little pings. Now, these aren't GPS coordinates, but these are like a similar. It's kind of giving you a general accuracy of whereabouts the phone is. So what you would expect here is exactly what we see. So there's not much change in the coordinates. If you plot these, they do bounce around a bit, but that's because there's obviously these massive margins of error. But if you were actually to go into town somewhere closer to the tower, if you're moving around, and you had more pings, you're going to get a better kind of trail, I suppose. It's not the exact breadcrumbs of you can't completely plot their path. It's not as good as geofencing, and it's not as good as some of those GPS coordinates that we see in the Knowledge Sea, but it would give us an idea of what is going on the phone. Is the phone being used? Is the phone moving around a lot? Things like that. Hey, Cryptex, nice to see you. So it would give you relevant information. It's hard to tell because this is the only exemplar that I've got here. I should have looked up and seen if I could find some for other cases, but this is not a great exemplar because of the terrible accuracy here. But that's because this is in the woods. Essentially, they're already on the Monon High Bridge. We actually don't have any earlier than 205, so we can't actually see how much better it was, when they were at Mears or when they were on their way there and when the car was moving, because I think that would be really useful. I'm sure this is multiple pages long, but of course we only have one page of it. Again, if anyone can find the rest of the pages, I'd love to look at it. But yeah, so if we're looking at Rick, though, you would expect between 2:05 and 5:45 that his is going to ping a lot more times, and you probably get a basic understanding of his general movement. It's not live tracking, but it's going to give you historical data that will help you to understand how active he was, and particularly if you use that alongside CDR, which would show you if it's texting, calling, whatever. It's going to give you a behavioral timeline, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. So yeah, if you've got the same tower, same sector like we have with Rick's house, they need something like NELOS, because it's how are you supposed to differentiate if he's pinging with the same tower, same sector? He could be at home or he could be on the trails. So this is the exact sort of situation where NELOS is going to give you a more accurate kind of understanding of his location, as opposed to the tower dumps, and before they could access geofencing, because geofencing would be better than both of those. Which, again, I think would explain why the tip was printed out again in 2019, because I believe that's a time when they did the geofencing warrants, right? Because that's around the time that geofencing became more of a thing that was used in investigations. In 2017, it wasn't really, it could be used, but it wasn't heavily used. So I think that, just like I said before, for future proofing, they had these details, and once they had better data, i.e. geofencing, then they could have again cross-referenced Rick against that data as well, and again said, yep, we're all good here. And maybe that's when the lead cleared mark is put on it too. Who knows? I don't know. But realistically, NELOS and geofencing could both be used. Geofencing would be more accurate, but NELOS would be more immediate. Okay, so this is kind of what NELOS can show. Even if it can't triangulate specifically, it can show registration timing, attach, detach events, whether the handset behaved consistently with being mobile, stationary, powered off, or absent during the window. So when geography collapses, in this case, because we only have one tower, we need to look at resolution time, device identity, and this makes NELOS more, not less, useful here. If investigators didn't escalate beyond basic tower data in this exact configuration, that would be a red flag. So I've always said, like, having that IMEI and need, and you then put it on the PCA as well, you don't collect that information for no good reason. And the idea that, well, they collected it for a good reason, but then that got lost, doesn't make sense when we've got multiple copies of documentation floating around and on Orion. I think most of us would agree that the lost tip narrative is a fairy tale. It doesn't make any sense. So I've already gone over the disposition summary, but again, this is what got me thinking again. I actually went back to the lead. It's actually your fault, See-Through. See-Through's getting picked on today. I don't, not picking on you, See-Through, but because I was looking back again at what did Rick actually say about the three girls, and my heart sank because it says near the Freedom Bridge, and I was like, no, I think he says them near the trailhead. But anyway, I mean, that's semantics. Potato, right? But what's more important is I was like, wait a minute, like, why did they print this on the 25th? Like, what would be the reason for printing this? And as far as my research showed, again, I'm not law enforcement, but this would be printed potentially for, like, how they do those briefing meetings and things. It'd be like for the investigators to go, so where are we up to with that guy? What happened with him? This is a week after Doolan has spoken to him. And my suggestion is that this is now covered, which is basically, I believe, is the Orion kind of term for cleared, essentially. We've done this, complete, covered. This is after those other documents that Kathy Shank shows. Those were the earlier documents before it was cleared and covered. And this is the printout where they've gone, okay, cool, this guy is off our radar. But, we need to report back to the investigators because clearly he's one of very few people who were on the trails in that time frame. So I'm sure Holman and Mullins and all the usual friendly law enforcement officers in Delphi would be wanting to know what happened with this guy. So yeah, I think that this is what cleared the lead. We've got himself placing himself on the trails at the timing, the same tower, same sector problem. We know that they took a formal ID capture, so they were being more thorough with Rick than they were, say, with Cheyenne Mill. And we know they had quick access to NELOS. So the best explanation is they were actually doing the right thing at that point. They were doing proper early triage, not a casual chat and not a full suspect build. Again, I'm not in law enforcement. I only can go by what I see in TV shows, which I know is not necessarily super accurate, but my sense is that they're not going to drill into him straight away, even if they were a little bit suspicious of him. They want to just be casual because they don't want to go hard on someone without having very much to be suspicious about. And so yeah, they send out Doolan. He's casual. He's in the car park. He gets the right information. Rick agrees. And there's a really good reason as well to be a little bit more casual with him, because Rick doesn't have to agree to give the phone identifiers. He doesn't actually have to hand his phone over voluntarily. But the fact is, once he does, that gives them free rein to then get the NELOS report without having to go through jump through hoops to get it. Okay, so that's so basically I think that's why the tip could be marked covered, functionally closed without any fanfare. I'm gonna actually go through this because I'm gonna get to one of the slides later on. I'll drop the link to these slides in the description because I haven't been updating the website. So apologies for that, guys. But if you want to read through each of the slides, then you can do that there. Here we go. Yeah, this is the part I wanted to get to. So if somebody hands over their phone or provides handset details, it doesn't mean that the person's told what the data will be done, like what will be done with the data, what data will be requested or received based on those identifiers. So what the consent covers is physical access to the device, viewing contents of the phone, recording handset identifiers, and the person, so Rick wouldn't be then told what law enforcement did with that. Did they request carrier side data? Did they get specific records like NELOS style handset analysis? Whether their data was used to exclude them, whether the data is retained, summarized, or archived. None of that would be told. This is all going on behind the scenes. Once you've given them access to your phone, then that is you giving consent for them to do that stuff, and they don't need to tell you. So device consent doesn't mean that you then get transparency about what then shows up. And so a cooperative witness may never be informed that their handset was queried before the device, beyond their device. A formal request was sent to the carrier, a report was generated and later closed. There's no need for them to follow up and say to every single person, thanks for giving us your phone, all good, bye. Like, they're not going to do that. They're going to basically just quietly close it, no fanfare, done. We just don't need to follow up with that guy again. So it's kind of like if you apply for a job, you don't always get a call back for every application that you hand in, because otherwise employers would be, on the phone all day, every day, particularly in, where there's big volumes of people. And the same goes here. They're not going to now say, oh, thanks, Rick. Now we just checked your phone and it's all clear, so don't worry about it. They wouldn't need to formally request his permission to run those reports, to request those reports. Once he's handed that handset over and let them look at it and write down the identifier, he's essentially given consent. So in the early stages of Delphi, any handset analysis relating to Rick could have been requested under a lawful court order or expedited process tied to a tip or investigative lead, not necessarily filed in the later prosecution record. The absence of a visible warrant does not mean the data was never requested. It more likely reflects that early investigative materials were closed, archived, or never incorporated once the lead was marked covered. So essentially, because he wasn't a suspect, they didn't need to have any, massive documentation on a file about Rick Allen because he wasn't a person of interest or a suspect. So essentially, this can all be quite a quiet process. It's not even necessary that they're deliberately hiding it from the prosecution record. That was done in 2017. It was no major issue. There was no extra follow-up required. And so they may not have put that official documentation somewhere visible. Now, I'm being generous there, as if they didn't look for that. I don't know. For me, I don't really believe that when they pulled the tip, they didn't look at everything related to that tip. But essentially, that information could have been filed tied to the tip number, not to Richard Allen, because Richard Allen wasn't a suspect in 2017. And so it was just a quiet exclusion, as opposed to, we better make sure we have all these reports and we have everything to the T because this guy's a suspect. So I think that makes sense. I'm still narrowing that down, but my understanding is you don't need to formalize it if it's just a quick check process. You'd need to formalize it if you then need to have it later for court. Now, in this case, there was no need to have anything later for court for Rick in 2017 because he wasn't considered a suspect. He was interviewed once. There was no further follow-up. He wasn't a person of interest. So I've skipped a whole lot of this because we've already been talking for an hour and you don't need to know the ins and outs of NELOS. You can have a look at the slides. Like I said, I'll drop them in a pinned comment or in the description later for you to click on and have a look at. But what can actually be done? Well, this is according to me, and I am not an expert in any of this, but this is the research that I've done suggests that this is some of the stuff that potentially the defense could do, or any investigation to support Rick could do, to request the Orion backend metadata specific to that tip file. They should be able to find out who printed the disposition summary on February the 25th. They should be able to see who changed the status to covered, whether there are any notes, fields, or timestamps that were edited, deleted, or overwritten, whether a NELOS report was attached, referenced, or internally reviewed without being disclosed. They could subpoena AT&T or whatever phone provider and FBI cast records to determine whether a subpoena or portal request for NELOS data was submitted for Rick's phone, and if so, whether any records were returned, and if not, why NELOS was not requested, given that Allen placed himself at the scene. They could request access logs, print logs, system audit trails within AT&T law enforcement portal. If such records exist, they could, again, confirm whether his need or phone number was queried, whether NELOS was never requested or was requested and then not disclosed. But either scenario raises serious questions. The actions can help us clarify whether it was done, but if it wasn't done, that still raises serious questions. Why would they not have done that? And again, we can't just keep saying, oh, well, oops. I mean, how many oopses are they going to get away with? And nobody seems to have ever got in trouble for any of the oopses so far. And I've said this before, if at my work I made even one of these errors, I probably wouldn't have a job anymore. Like, it's just ludicrous. And yet some of these people got, kudos and awards and things. So if they didn't do it and there's no sign of it, that's still a problem. But if they did do it, and it's not been disclosed or it's been edited or sanitized as well, not accusing anyone, but that would be a big issue as well. Thanks so much, Shay. Oh, that's so beautiful. I got a few members now. I might need to do a members only stream because I got a few of you guys. I really appreciate it, Shay. So lovely of you to join the community, and I appreciate everybody for coming in, liking, commenting, talking, disagreeing, agreeing, as long as we're all being respectful, which we usually are. I really appreciate all of you guys. So, okay, I'm going to finish up in a minute because I'm getting tired, but what do we all think? I'm going to go back to YouTube and I'm going to put a new poll up for you guys. Oh, someone knew about NELOS. Who knew about NELOS? So 24 votes, one person must have. If you knew about NELOS, let us know in the chat, and let's do a poll again. Do you think Ellie did request NELOS or similar for Rick's phone in 2017? Okay, there we go. So I don't know what you guys think. Do you feel like this is as big as Josh and I think it is? I mean, essentially, when I shared this with Josh, he was like, "Wow, like this is big," and I thought it was too. But I think lots of things are big. I'm an excitable person, and then sometimes I jump straight in and then go, "Oh, it wasn't as big as I thought," and I got a bit overexcited. But I think this one was, and we sat on it. We've sat on it for a while now, just a few weeks. So that I could just let it marinate and make a decision as to whether it seems like a sensible idea or whether I'm just again jumping to a conclusion just because I get carried away. But I think it's important. I like, my biggest concern is that there isn't any way to verify this, and I just keep feeling like this law enforcement gets away with oopsies all the time. They could just say, well, no, there's just no record of it. Oh, whoops, we didn't do that. We forgot because the tip was lost. But I mean, it's just not good enough. I just, how many times are we supposed to believe that? I don't usually act as indignant as I do right now about this whole lost tip stuff. It's ludicrous. I just want to remind everybody of the ridiculousness of it, because this is what Kathy Shank was filing. Remember, so this is the first sheet. This is the one that had lead cleared, but it did say phone info provided to ISP. Then we've got that one being on the 18th. Okay, nothing too weird about that other than someone's cleared it and no one seems to know who has these specific writing styles. And then this one we know is ridiculous. Look when it was printed. Interesting, right? Because actually, you guys can't see that on the screen. I just realized. Give me a sec. I don't know how to. Oh, sorry, I've got to hide Shay's comment for a minute. But yeah, so here we've got the date, the print date. Now, Kathy Shank kind of first seen this in 2022. That's ridiculous, because it's not even that this was just printed on that date. Look who was logged in. Okay, this is a printout. This is not a bulk printout. This is one of one. So this is someone who's looked up this particular tip and printed it. Why? Is it because of the geofencing that was being done at that point? Is it when they were kind of trying to follow new directions? The reality is, though, look, fully covered. Okay, so this here was printed in 2019. This is printed on the 18th of February, and then remember, these are the ones that Kathy found. But then we've got this other exhibit here, which we've been talking about today, which is a disposition summary, and this is printed. Oh, look, it's the 25th, but this wasn't found by Kathy Shank. So who found this one? And then we're never going to forget the copy of the copy of the copy, because Doolan loves to tell his whole process, but his process doesn't make sense. He says that he prints takes a copy of everything that he's submitting, and then he scans it and emails it to himself and shreds the originals. That's why we can't see his handwritten notes on the back of it. But then when Liggett calls him, he goes and consults his binder. So you shredded it and you emailed it to yourself, and then you just printed the scanned copy. Why? And then it just doesn't make sense, right? I literally think that if I explain this to my kids, they'd be like, but why would someone do that, right? And my kids are little. It doesn't make sense. Sorry, I get really on my soapbox about this. It's just so annoying because it's just so obviously silly. It's absurd. And, for me, I don't usually jump straight into everything's absurd and silly, but this really is. It's just ridiculous. And so none of us are going to believe that this tip about Rick Allen was just ignored. And then we've got to add into it that Doolan interviewed him on the 18th. So he literally had the worst case of dissociative amnesia or something, because he's on the stage at the press conference appealing for anyone who knows someone that looks like Bridge Guy just a couple of days later. And then we also have to bear in mind, look at this, Jerry Holman. He's the one who received it in the first place when Rick went into the station with Kathy, right? Because that's about the time he got home from work and Kathy said, let's go into the station. And there we go, received by him at 4:30. Then Alexis Lucas has created the Orion work package. And then we've got Dan Doolan has done his part. And then there's Alexis, not Alexis, sorry. I'm getting all the names confused now, and that's Alexis. And then there's Ashley Boone. Like, how many people have seen this, but none of them thought about it? Only Kathy Shank thought about it, right? Only. Shay, you know what? I would take this summary with a pinch of salt. One of the things is, I think if you listen to Rick's own words, I mean, he's verbose. You know, he goes on a million different tangents, and I think that potentially Doolan's used shorthand and he thought the trailhead means the Freedom Bridge. The thing is that people use trailhead interchangeably there in Delphi. And so if you listen to Rick's actual words, it doesn't actually align with the Freedom Bridge. But anyway, regardless, I guess, you know, yeah, it's a potential. I did look at it, and you know, that was what got me back to looking at the tips again. So, yeah, I guess it's still a possibility too. And see through, yeah, I mean, yes, potentially, but I mean, Holman was the lead investigator, and this person says he's at the trails between 1 and 3, and they already knew at that point that what time the girls arrived, and they already knew at that point that, you know, the 3 girls had seen a man. You know, like there's just too much to it. This is a middle-aged man. Bridge Guy does look like a middle-aged man. It's hard to tell, but yeah. I know I probably seem like I'm hell-bent on just sticking to my story. I get it. I know, but I really honestly think that it's not just that he says the trailhead, it's that he says back to where the cars were parked. It's like, you know, the cars are not parked at Freedom Bridge. And if they're walking from Freedom Bridge back down towards the Monon High Bridge, then they'd be walking parallel, or he'd be walking after them, or they'd be behind him. His story is a lot clearer. It's more detailed. Doolan's is his few lines, I mean, which I think is, again, ridiculous for a double homicide of 2 little girls. And this is the best information you get. Like, I think I've said this to you before, like, this is about the amount of information my receptionist would get if you call up and, you know, and want to make an appointment with me. They'll say, oh, okay, can you just tell me a little bit about what your concerns are? And they would write, you know, a couple of lines like this so that I know before I meet you what you're coming to see me for. This is not what you write, you know, when you're doing an interview for a double homicide, surely. Right. So if you come in and I interview you as part of my job, I'm going to have 3 pages. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to have 3 pages with every tip, but this is to me, this is lacking so much detail, and Rick gives so much more detail in his interview years later. See through, he says he doesn't see the cars then, he sees the cars when he's leaving, but that's what he refers to as where the cars park, because he says most people park at the Mears, at the farmer's entrance. So it doesn't mean he thinks he saw the cars then. It means that's where the cars are parked. So he's assuming they're headed back to where the cars are parked. I mean, I think that's also a pickup spot. That's where Derek German goes, for example. So he may not have necessarily meant I see a car parked there at that point. Anyway, it's a hard one. It's a difficult one. But let's go back to unindicted. NELOS, I don't know when when they started to use it unindicted, but it was definitely a mainstay in 2017. So actually, we could probably ask ChatGPT. I mean, I'll just ask now, but it probably need to double check it. When did phone providers start using things like NELOS and providing them to? Let's see. I think it would be earlier than that. So from the late 1990s, I was going to say 1900s, 1990s to early 2000s, mobile carriers began storing CDRs, and then early to mid 2000s, um, they were required to improve location accuracy, and then mid to late 2000s, AT&T and major carriers deploy dedicated law enforcement compliance tools. So NELOS emerges in this era. So between about 2006 to 2010. And then in the early 2010, so 2010 to 2014, NELOS and equivalents are standardized, widely trained on, regularly requested, and serious crimes. So yeah, it actually predates modern smartphones. It's network-based, not app-based. And by 2017, it was long established and commonly used for suspects, witnesses, and early persons of interest. I'll do some more research actually, because I hadn't thought about looking up other like NELOS from other cases. Yeah, sorry, I can never multitask. I was looking at the chat and saying it at the same time. There's no proper record of the interview from 2017 of Rick Aisha, unfortunately. So what Doolan says is that he wrote scrap notes on the back of one of these tip sheets, but of course, remember, he says he photocopied, handed it in, emailed it to himself, and then shredded it, and that's why we don't have that. Ridiculous, right? But yeah, this is the best what we've got. Yes, unindicted, they were aware of it and they were using it, and they had the FBI already involved. And the reason we know for sure that they were using it is because of this. This here is from the 20th of February. This is Libby's. So I know someone will say, oh, that's not Rick's phone. It's not Rick's phone, it's Libby's. But it shows you the speed at which they could get these as well. Look at how quickly they could get this stuff. And my sense is possibly that they would have sent a whole batch of these. I mean, this you can actually get this, I think, but within hours. So I would imagine maybe the FBI have said, you know what, you need to do this because the CDR isn't very useful in this case. So yeah, this would have so basically you've got tower dumps, you've got as the first line, not super accurate, particularly in a small town with only one or two towers. Then you've got NELOS in the middle, and then you've got geofencing, and then you've got the sort of GPS coordinates that we get in Knowledge C and things like that are the most accurate. So, which is why it's so annoying that they don't have Rick's phone, because that would have had the most accurate indicator of his location, GPS location. Although it may not have, because remember, GPS location timestamps on Knowledge C, for example, are only activated by certain apps. And in the case of Abby and Libby, it's the camera app being used. And I mean, Rick's not Snapchatting, I wouldn't imagine. So it may not have provided great coordinates. It's really sus, Aisha. Yeah. I mean, this is a little joke that I made. Definitely, if you want a little bit of snark and fun, go back to the Lost Chip narrative series. I noticed you're new here, so definitely if that's one to binge. It's kind of funny. I've got my dog Daisy, who I named the channel after, with side-eyeing basically all the ridiculousness, because it's like there's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It doesn't make sense at all. It's like it defies any logic. The parking situation, Shay, yeah, I mean, look, to me, there are two distinct cars parked there. So I'm one of the people who supports Rick, who does believe he parked at the CPS. And the reason for that, I think if you watch my Tale of Two Cars video, I think that's largely accurate. I mean, sometimes I evolve my views a little bit over time, but essentially I believe there's two cars. Some people see the small black one, and some people see the older model one. I think Betsy Blair blurs the two together, which can happen. Memory for cars is really bad, guys. And it's actually going to be better if you have some personal relationship with the car, if that makes sense. That's a weird way to say it, but like if it's a car that has some relevance to you, and so the Comet had relevance to her. And also we noticed she said in one of the exhibits we saw, she said the car was most similar in shape to McCain's car, which was a more older style type sedan car. So she was seeing a car that was definitely not Rick's car, but then other people said they saw the small dark car. And I believe Rick is open to the fact that he either parked at Old Camden or he parked at the CPS. I believe he parked at the CPS. And I believe he left it around 2 o'clock ish. And it's interesting to me that a lot of things seem to happen at 2:07. You know, the photos taken, which I don't think is suspicious. At that point, the girls are still happy. And straight after that, Libby locks the phone. She never unlocks it again. And Bridge Guy would have pretty much have to be appearing on the bridge around that time to get to where he's at in the Bridge Guy video. 6 or 7 minutes later, he could have crossed the bridge in that time. So, and then we've got the car going in the private drive at 2:07. Interestingly, I watched a video the other day. There was a gate there. I don't know. It had a chain. I don't know if it was fully locked or not, but I think that might have impeded the car going down and the girls being abducted. And so I think they changed plans. And I think that the offender went to the cemetery or some other access point instead. But yeah. Yeah, there's just so much to try and make sense of, isn't there, guys? There's so many questions. And it's interesting because as soon as I start talking about it, I'm like, oh, then there's that, and then there's that. And it's just this whole web. I literally feel like I need to like have a massive piece of butcher's paper to show all the webs of things attached to each other. I think I'm pretty much now sold on the fact that the girls were meeting someone they knew and trusted, and that's young Bridge Guy, just because of the 151 Snapchat too, the fact that he looked like he was waiting for someone. I think that Daniel Pearson arrives later, but yeah, I could be wrong on that. Yeah, and I don't know who that person is. It's that's the hard stuff. I do sort of speculate on some theories and things like that. But yeah, I think I've always sort of maintained probably my best offering is going to be, how to prove Rick wasn't the guy, I think. Yeah, I agree with you, RC991. I mean, yeah, I mean, because if they were sort of hanging around, I mean, according to Teresa Liebert, that's around that area, isn't it? Like, so why would they not have realized that there's a gate and that it's chained up? It's weird, right? But also, even if it's not locked, the chain on it shows us that Brad Weber isn't going to be able to just drive down that really quickly at the speed of light to arrive there at the time that the state said he did, because you got to get out of the car, unchain it, open it, maybe then close it behind you. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hate it when you have a gate to the place. You know, when you go to an Airbnb and they've got a gate and you've got to get out and then you've got to like lock it, and can't stand that stuff. It's so annoying. So, yeah, it's bad planning, isn't it, for people who seem to have planned everything. But I think it adds up because we know there's that 7-minute pause where I believe the phone is on the ground, hence the cold shock, and the girls are not moving. And I don't think that the people who are coordinating this, they don't have their phones near the crime scene, right? So I think they're not in communication. So I think Bridge Guy takes the girls down the hill and he's waiting around the private drive area, because down the hill goes straight to the private drive, right? And that car is meant to be there, but it's not. And so he waits. And that's about the time it would take for a car to go from the private drive to the cemetery, the person to jump out and kind of walk down towards the crime scene area and across the creek. So it's a possibility. I don't know, though. Yes, Christopher, I will. One day people like come to my house and they'll see like things all over the wall and I'll be in trouble. They'll be like, what is this? What is this woman doing? Yeah, I mean, but it's an obsession, isn't it? Like, it's so hard not to get obsessed with this case because there's just so much to it. Anyway, guys, I've been talking for ages and it's 11:45. It is nearly New Year's Eve here, last day of the year. I think it is for you too, Christopher, right? Because you are an Aussie as well. And so I'm going to leave it there for now. I think that's a bombshell, the NELOS stuff. I don't know what you guys think. Give it some time to to marinate. Like I said, I will put the link. I'll do it now before I go to sleep. I'll put the link for the slides up so you can go and have a look through all of that and yeah, see if you can get your head around it. Oh, Aisha, you're an Aussie too. Yay. I love the Aussies coming in. I agree with you quietly. Yeah, I always saw Abby's face just look so traumatized in that picture. And I don't know. I mean, maybe they just caught her an off angle or something, but I just like an off time. Yeah, sometimes if you're not expecting a photo, but yeah, I felt a bit spooked by that photo of her in the car. But yeah, who knows? Who knows what was kind of going on? But I do think at 2:07 in that photo, she looks okay. She looks like she's posing for a normal photo. I do believe that photo is um, not suspicious. I've talked about why it's not in the cache. And also, um, the white border thing, guys, has been coming up. So, just quickly, the white border on a Snapchat image is to do with a picture being sent that is either a screenshot of a snap or from the camera roll. Now, that doesn't mean that the girls themselves, that Libby herself sent something from the camera roll or a screenshot, but it means that whoever screenshotted it at the 7 hour mark then possibly texted it to Kelsey or someone else who then took it to the police. Does that make sense? So let's say see through posts a Snapchat at 2 o'clock and then I screenshot it at 9 o'clock. It would say 7 hours ago. And then I send it to Aisha. Aisha then takes it to the police. See-through's photo will have the white border. It doesn't mean that see-through's photo had the white border when see-through put it as their story. It means that we've got a copy of a copy again. It's yeah, anyway, I can explain that in more detail if anyone's interested, and we can talk about that over time. See-through, I'm going to double check again the timing. I think if I'm correct, that there's enough time for the person to drive from the private drive to the cemetery and probably drop someone off, or potentially maybe they drop someone off at the gate, and that person could get to Bridgegar and the girls in that sort of time frame, because I think it's about, what is it, it's like 10 minutes or something. I'll do the timing, but yeah. Oh, Tamworth, Aisha, lovely. Tamworth, I'm thinking if I've been to Tamworth. I don't think I have. Maybe I had gone through it, but I'm not sure. Well, it's great to see some Aussies in the Delphi case, and it's a better time for Aussies usually when I stream than our poor American people who are just waking up. But thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for all the support. Thank you, Shay, for joining the community. My goodness, I just appreciate the support so much, guys. You'll never know how much it means to me that people actually want to listen and engage, and thanks so much. And if you haven't caught the panel that I did with my buddies during our little ramblings about the symbolism, please definitely check that one out. I think that was really, really interesting. The panel's happy to join me and do more videos over time, so I'll definitely be bringing those wonderful ladies back on again. And watch this space. Josh will join me and we will continue to unpack this. So quietly, I know like sometimes it's hard to understand to begin with, and like I always sort of think it's because like I've spent like now a few weeks, and even I'm like struggling to like go, oh, what was that again? So like of course like I'm literally like speaking off the top of my head about it, and pulling lots of threads together. So give it some time to marinate. Like, yeah, I literally, it's taken me a lot of time with ChatGPT, and and I have spoken to Josh about it and kind of tried to like really drill down on it in my head. I wrote an explainer for Andy Baldwin, and that Josh mailed to him, because it was a lot. So a lot of the stuff that's in the slides is part of the explainer I sent to Andy Baldwin. So Andy hasn't replied to me, guys, just letting you guys know. I'm not trying to sort of name drop there. He hasn't been like, thanks so much for that. Not this time anyway. But Anyway, sorry guys, it's late now and I'm rambling. I'm going to go to sleep, and I will speak to you guys in a few days. And if I don't see you before 2026, have a wonderful New Year's Eve. Stay safe. Hey Deb, lovely to see you. Enjoy the holiday season. I've been away from my boys for a few days. I'm so excited. I'm going to see them tomorrow and go to the New Year's disco. I'm going to get all dressed up. I might take a photo for you guys of me wearing some sort of New Year's glasses or hats. We always get some of those funny things and glow sticks. And yeah, I might chat with you guys at some point before the new year. But otherwise, yeah, I'll see you in 2026. Have a wonderful night or day. Bye.